Hello everyone. In today's locomotive profile we're doing is one of the Denver Rio Grande's Westerns railroads 42 mountains. But they were not built, but rather they were delivered to that railroad from a different railroad. And that is meet Denver Rio Grande Western Railroad Class M69. They were four former Norfolk Western Railway K3 class 42 mountains that were sold secondhand on the D and R8 or GW during World War II to help move the increased wartime traffic over the Rio Grande's mainline districts, including Tennessee past Colorado. All four units were built from a class of 10 K3 class 42 heavy mountains. Built in 1927 by Norfolk Western's Roanoke shops for freight service, the design was considered to have been one of the largest and heaviest mountain types ever built, as they were numbered 200 to 209, being designed for heavy boiler consisting of 225 pounds psi. They had large 28 times 330 cylinders with with Baker valve gear riding on the below average size drivers of 63. The locomotives proved to have output a large sum of the horsepower at 68,880 pounds of tractive effort, respectively. Used in the Virginias for fast through freight service, these locomotives had a great modern features like a Wellington feed water heater, stoker, superheater, lubricators, even with a heavy haul tender, but were not fast enough for trains they were assigned to haul, and instead, after a bit were given coal hauling chores. Running shorter of water for such a large design flaw. The NAW crews referred to these units as water buffaloes, as the locomotives were based on the lighter and higher drivered K2, the smaller drivers with heavy weight made these locomotives rather uncomfortable riding past speeds of 35 miles per hour on their third drive axles, also due to the uneven counterweights. All units eventually had dog houses on their tenders to provide shelter for the brakemen due to their small, crowded engine cabs. Even with some small improvements, they were never popular with crews as the NAW did not like them. During the middle stage of the war after 1943, the K3s just were overshadowed by more efficient and larger locomotives like the famous the Y6 class that were being built at the time, as the road had no interest in scrapping or keeping them. All 10 were reserved in storage and put up for sale. The first 6 were sold, numbered 200 and 205, to Richmond, Fredericksburg, and Potomac. Ray as their RFNR number 515 through 520. As for the 4 remaining would stay in storage until spring of next year. During World War II, after April of 1945, the Denver Rio Grande Western Railroad was in need of more large motive power to help assist in now during late World War II after April 1945. The Denver Rio Grande Western Railroad was in need of more large motive power to help assist in rush wartime traffic. With being restricted to buy new diesel electric locomotives, the railroad had to stick with steam power as commanded by the U.S. regulations, as several NAWY2As were sold to the railroad at the time, becoming L190-109s. The Norfolk Western Railway already had 10 of the British-like 482 Mountains were for sale in the spring to fill the gap of Mountain-type engines on the roster. These enormous 482s were perfect for large two-cylinder powered to become second-hand in late May 1945. The DARGW officials purchased 4 K3s to assist with freight and helper service over Tennessee Pass and other mountainous divisions. These units were so well designed for. All 4 of these engines arrived at the railroad, Colorado's properties by early June 1945. Although the war already had ended in Europe a month prior, as with many second-hand units during the war, the Rio Grande reclassified them as M69s, renumbered them to 1550 to 1553, and it related their tenders with white paint before pressing into service, as the road only had time to do so. Instead of investing in modifications in the mid-1940s, these engines did well in freight service over the steep grades that the DNRGW liked, using them for their great power. Despite being costly a bit to operate, not being on the railroad for way too long, within barely 3 years, the Denver Rio Grande Western did not consider them worth rebuilding, as they were not going to stay for a while, As the war ended in September 1945, the railroad continued to use them along with other similar freight and helper engines until all wartime traffic and diesel restrictions were dropped completely by the spring of 1948. Although spending some time in storage in the Denver, Colorado. Not much, not way too much, was ever said that these engines time on the Rio Grande, but by July 1948, all four locomotives were on the WNLE lines as little after 1949. The Wheeling and Lake Erie Railway fully merged into the New York, Chicago, and St. Louis Railroad, meaning Nickel Plate Road, were very few reserved new numbers placed into the 800s. Numbers scheming restricted for routes were the WNLE had no such thing for routes. Were the WNLE had no such thing for speed. These units proved to perform well. However, just like the Denver Rio Grande, these locomotives would not be used on the lines for long. As the railroad was beginning to dieselization in the early 1950s, locomotives were all placed in a dead storage. All four of them will eventually be cut up by the cutter's torch, scrapped between 1951 and 1955. As with all K3s or any NAW 482 in general, none of them ever see life in preservation. It's a pity that no Rio Grande or the NAW 482s ever survive in preservation. They could have at least leave one of them preserved, even at a museum or static display, or potentially as a steam excursion. Well, one could dream. Like and subscribe, and see you later, guys.